Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto had an overpowered elder brother born on the Kyuubi night who lived only to protect him? OC times Anko times Kurenai times Tsunade times Shizune times Yugito times Samui times Mabui times Mei times Konan times Karen Ultimate Harem, Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Konoha was in ruins, buildings destroyed or burning, corpses cluttered the rubble. People had never known what had hit them when the Kyuubi no Yoko appeared out of a cloud of smoke and began to devastate the village without mercy in a bloodlust-filled rage. Now yellow spiked glowing chains that entangled its large body as it gnashed and growled at its captors far from the village in a large clearing in the woods bound the mighty Biju. Around the clearing a large dome had been erected, its structure made of the same chains that held back the Kyuubi while their energy created walls between them to keep anyone outside back while the events inside took place. The chains were coming from a single woman inside the dome. She had fair skin, violet eyes and long crimson red hair down to the base of her back with should-length strands that framed both sides of her face with a black clip that parts her hair to the left. She was wearing a white high-collared, sleeveless blouse under a green long, loose-fitting dress with a wristband on her left wrist and standard shinobi sandals. Behind her was a man with slightly tanned skin, bright blue eyes, and spiky blonde hair with bangs framing his face. His attire was a blue long-sleeved track suit with two bands on both of his sleeves, a green flak jacket, with 3 pouches on each side of the chest, a neck guard, extra padding over the shoulders which is fastened on by steel buttons, and a zipper down the middle, a blue Hitai-8 on his head with a leaf symbol engraved on it over it. He also wore a short-sleeved long white haori that was decorated by red flame-like motifs on the edges with the kanji for Yondaime Hokage, written vertically downwards, closed in the front by a thin, orange rope over this attire. But both were not going to stay in this world for long, as both stood in front of an altar holding back one of the Kyuubi's claws. However, they had both been pierced through their midsections by the sharp claw that had been heading to the sleeping forms on the altar. They were 2 sleeping babies, one wrapped in orange with messy blonde hair with 3 whisker marks on his cheeks, the other with messy crimson red hair which was finer than the first's, wrapped in a red blanket a shade darker than his hair. Behind the pair holding back the claw was translucent gaunt specter with a demonic visage. It is much larger than an average human, possessing long, shaggy white hair, from which 2 red horns protrude, with a mouth full of sharp, jagged teeth, and a very long, almost serpentine tongue, and purple-colored skin. It is draped in a large white garments and carries a set of prayer beads in its left hand and holding a tanto in its right hand, now looking down at the scene. The man spoke, "Kushina, I'm almost out of time." He spoke to the woman with blood dripping from the sides of his mouth in obvious pain. "It's time for the 8 trigram seal. I'll add our chakra so we can speak with Naruto later on. Please say your goodbyes." The woman, Kushina, looked down on the sleeping babies and smiled as best she could in her obvious state. "Naruto, Kenta, don't be picky about your foods, eat lots both of you, so you can grow up big. Take bathes every day, and stay warm, and Kenta, don't let Naruto stay up late at night, you'll both need your sleep. Make friends, you don't need a lot of them, just a few that you can really trust. I'm not one to talk, but do your best in school and ninjutsu. Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses, so don't feel down if you're not good at something, help each other, that's what brothers are for. Respect your teachers and seniors at the academy. Oh, and don't forget the 3 shinobi vices. Be especially careful when lending or borrowing money. Make sure to save the money you earn from missions. Don't drink any alcohol until you're 21. Drinking is bad for your health, so do so moderately. And as for women, I'm a woman myself, so I don't know much about this, but there are only men and women in this world, so it's okay if you're interested in a woman. Just try not to go after bad ones, try to find ones just like mom. Speaking of vices, watch out for Jiraiya-sensei, ya know. Naruto, you will face a lot of pain and suffering in your life, Believe in yourself and rely on your brother. In the end, family is all you really have. Kenta, look out for your little brother and protect him. Believe in each other and believe in your dreams, but most of all believe that your dreams will come true. She said as tears started to come to her eyes. There are so many, 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 many more things I want to share with you both. I wish I could stay with you both longer. I love you both so much. I'm sorry, Minato, I spoke for too long. She finished in apology to the man behind her, as tears streamed down her cheeks, who just smiled lightly and shook his head. Don't worry, Naruto, Kenta, my advice to you both as your father, is the same as your chatty mother just said with one extra. Naruto, listen to your big brother, and Kenta, look out for your little brother. I'm so sorry neither of us could be there to watch you both grow up, but this is all we can offer you. Minato said as he peered around Kushina to the sleeping forms on the altar before smiling contently as he closed his eyes and spoke, Hake Fuin, as a bright light engulfed them. Scene break. Several hours later, in the tallest building in Konoha, the Hokage Tower. A man in his late 50s sat holding the oldest of the babies in his arms while the younger blonde lay in the crib in front of them. The man was of short stature compared to most, his tanned skin starting to develop wrinkles, has 2 lines running vertically under the outer corners of each eye, and a few liver spots under his left eye. His hair was dark brown with a spiked upward, and had a messy dark brown goatee. He was Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage of Konohagakure, respected by all who knew him, and revered for his 2 titles, the Professor, and Shinobi no Kami. Now Hiruzen sat looking down at the babe in his arms and the small child looking back up at him, his blue eyes innocent and carefree. Hiruzen could only give a small smile to the child as he held him with a small sigh. Barely 1 day old in this world, and you and your brother have been through so much, the deaths of both your parents, your younger brother becoming the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, Hiruzen whispered as he looked down to the child, as a small frown came to his face, the civilians calling for both your heads out of sheer ignorance, Danzo asking to take your brother for his NA program, both of which I will never allow to happen. Hiruzen said as the small babe wrapped his fingers around one of his own, making him smile. You're a fighter, just like your father and mother. Hiruzen said before taking a sad breath in the memory of his former successor and wife now passed. I'm sorry, no child or children should grow up missing a parent, let alone both. I'm not sure what the future holds that awaits you both, but know this, I will do everything in my power to make sure you both live happy lives and grow up just like your parents would want. I couldn't face Minato or Kushina in the afterlife if I didn't. Hiruzen finished with a small smile as the babe's eyes started to close as the Sandaime Hokage stood up. Moving to the cot in front of them, he placed the small babe down into it right next to his blonde younger sibling who was already sleeping. With a smile, Hiruzen fixed their blankets before watching the eldest drift off to sleep, but whatever happens, I know you'll both be fine. Time skipped 10 years. The sun shone bright over Konoha as the shops began to open and the civilians started their days. It had been 10 years since that night of the Kyuubi attack, 10 years since the village had known that horror. While the village had recovered and mourned its losses, there was still an air of hatred about the village, though it was buried deep down but often flared up. Its focus was on one or both of the only 2 occupants of the twin-joined apartments in a rundown apartment complex in the red light district of the poorer part of Konoha. The building itself was recently restored on order of the Hokage to house its 2 newest occupants, who shared the twin-joined apartments. The building itself was a U-shape with the joined apartments on the top 2nd floor on the left side of the building. The apartments are identical clones of each other except for the different paint colors. One had a warm white paint and the other a warm gray, both with wooden flooring in an open space plain design, with kitchen, bedroom and living room all in one space, and the bathrooms were on opposing sides. The kitchen spaces were plain with metal and hardwood worktops with a plastic coating finish. Both had sinks and cookers, though only the second apartment looked to be in use. In the bedroom of the first, a head of spiky red hair can be seen under the plain white covers. The bed was a solid wood frame that looked recently new. Beside the bed, a digital alarm clock went off, It was a rectangular metal clock with a black screen with bright red numbers and a push switch on top. As the clock turned to 8, it started beeping over and over again, making the occupant of the bed groan as he turned. The redhead opened his eyes, showing the cerulean blue orbs, and squints at the light as he reaches out from below the cover and whacks the alarm clock, silencing it before running his hand over his face to wipe the sleep away. Pushing himself up into a sitting position, the cover falls from the redhead's torso, showing he's shirtless and was quite lean, not extremely muscular, but he didn't have much baby fat, and there was some muscle definition showing he was quite active, but there were some light scarring from what looked like knife wounds on his arms and a few on his chest, but all looked to have healed long ago. With a yawn, the redhead got out of the bed and stretched his arms up as he closed his eyes. All he was wearing was a pair of black baggy pajama bottoms and no socks. He was roughly 4 feet 9 inches, which is tall for his age. Opening his eyes again, now slightly more awake, he started over to the door joining the apartments and gave it a rough hard knock. "Naruto, time to get up, I'll be in to make breakfast in 10 minutes. The redhead called through the door, getting a mumbled response. Hearing the response, the redhead turned and headed to the bathroom. Walking in the bathroom was a simple square room, enough space for a small shower, sink and a toilet. The tiles on the ground and wall were plain white and stopped halfway up the wall where a white paint started. Turning on the sink, the boy filled it halfway before dunking his head in the freezing cold water before pulling his head out, his eyes wide and hair dripping wet as he panted from the sudden burst of cold as he reached for the towel, now wide awake. Finishing drying his face, the boy looked himself over in the mirror. His face was somewhat narrow with a curved chin with softened features. His red hair was messy and in spikes with long bangs on the sides of his face, making his cerulean blue eyes stand out even more. Walking back into the bedroom to get dressed, the boy couldn't help but be thankful for the new apartments he and his younger brother were living in now, after they were both kicked out of the orphanage a week ago. They had started to live on the streets, but were found on the first night by a mask-wearing shinobi in the shape of a dog's head with spiked-up silver hair. He had brought them to the Hokage and they had spent the night in his office, and the next day he had gotten them both these apartments after the orphanage refused to take them back, their reason being the pranks the younger of the two played and the fights the older one got into defending the younger one. As he finished getting dressed by pulling on a white t-shirt with a red band going from his right shoulder to his left hip, he lifted a black strip of cloth and tied it around his head, keeping his spiky hair up and out of his face. Giving a final yawn and stretch, the boy walked over to the door and knocked again. "Ready or not, Naruto, I'm coming in," he said as he turned the handle and opened the door. As he walked in, he smirked, seeing the yawning and stretching form of his younger brother coming to greet him. He had bright blonde hair and a rather chubby face with 3 whisker birth marks on either cheek. As he finished yawning, he opened his eyes, showing the same cerulean blue eyes that his brother shared. He was wearing a pair of light blue pajama bottoms and white shirt with a black nightcap on his head. Seeing his brother, the blonde smiled. "Morning, Kenta ni." Kenta smiled, giving a small chuckle. "Morning, Odoto. You go and wake yourself up and I'll get breakfast on the go," he said, shaking his head. With a groggy nod, Naruto turned and walked to the bathroom on the other side of the apartment while Kenta went into the kitchen area and started going through the cupboards. Opening one after another, he started to frown. "Out of food again, and there's no telling what they'll charge us this time if I go now," Kenta thought as he opened the last cupboard and sighed as he took out the content. 2 instant ramen tubs inside. "Breakfast of champions," he thought rhetorically as he put the water in and put them in the microwave before sitting down and sighing. Naruto came out of the bathroom and saw his brother sighing and walked over. "What's the matter, Ni-chan?" he asked, hating to see his big brother worried. Kenta shook his head with a sigh. "We're out of food again. I'm going to have to go see Gigi and see if he can have our groceries sorted by other means. I swear that girl is overcharging us for our food," Kenta said as Naruto sat down. "I'm sure Gigi can help, he always does," Naruto said as he tried to think of a way to brighten the mood before smiling. "Hey, do you want to help me prank some guys today? I've got loads of ideas," Naruto said, exaggerating by throwing his arms out wide, making Kenta smirk before he shook his head. "Sorry, Odoto. Maybe later when I get back from seeing Gigi about our food situation and some other things. Kenta said with a small smile. This got Naruto's attention. What other things? Naruto asked, curious as to what his older brother was going to be seeing their grandfather figure about. Kenta smirked. I'm going to see if Gigi can help me start my shinobi training early. I'm sure he has some books he can lend me so I can start. Maybe he'll even take me on as his student if I ask him. He trained the 3 Sannin and they were the strongest shinobi in the village. To be taught by him or them would be amazing. Kenta said, his mood brighten up. Naruto blinked, seeing his brother's enthusiasm. But we've got 2 years before we start the academy, Ni-chan. What's the rush? Kenta smirked as he reached over and rustled his brother's hair. You can never be too prepared when it comes to things like this, Ototo. Remember that, he said with a smirk as his brother pushed his hand off his head and pouted. You always act so much older than me, even though there is only 5 minutes between us. Naruto pouted at his brother, treating him like a little kid. Kenta smirked. Bigger brothers always grow up quicker. They have to in order to look out for their Ototos, he said as the microwave finally dinged and Kenta got up to get the food. Taking the bowls out, he put them on the table and handed Naruto a pair of chopsticks. They pulled back the lids and Naruto inhaled the smell like it was a sweet perfume. Ah, food of Kami-sama for breakfast. Is there any better way to start the day? Naruto smiled as he took in the scene. Kenta chuckled as he shook his head at his brother's words. Well, I'm not sure about ramen for breakfast, but it will do for today, he said as they put their hands together and bowed, Itadakimasu, before starting to eat. Scene break. In the tallest building in Konohagakure, the Hokage Tower, was the Hokage's office. The room was comfortable, meant for the Hokage to be able to go about his duties as such. The far back of the room was rounded with multiple windows allowing light to fill the room. In the center of those windows was the logger desk of the Hokage with stacks of paperwork on one side. On the opposite end of the room were 2 sofas with bookshelves filled with many books that have been read behind them. Behind the desk sat a tired and weary Hiruzen Sarutobi, his face showing his age more and more with every passing year. The last 10 years had taken its toll on the elderly Hokage. He had hoped to no longer be there, as it was over 10 years ago he had named his successor. But sadly he had no choice after the Kyuubi attack and the death of that successor but to retake his position. It was the only way he could protect his successor's legacy. Had he not, he was sure they'd have been dead by now, or worse for young Naruto, turned into a mindless puppet for wars, as had been the suggestion of his war advisor when Naruto's status had been told to the council. Now his days had been filled with more paperwork than he ever had before. The majority of the paperwork was all from the council. The civilian side was always trying to scrape more power from him or slip laws by him that were just too ridiculous to even comprehend. Sometimes Hiruzen cursed his second sensei for ever creating the council. He agreed the civilians should have a say as it was their village as well, but to quote the Nara clan, they made things more troublesome than it needed to be. His paperwork pile wouldn't even be a tenth of what it was now if it wasn't for the civilian council. He couldn't even remember the last chance he had to train, and he knew it was starting to show. He was grateful for any distraction he could get from the bane of his existence, and this morning that distraction came in the form of a small hand knocking on his office door. Come in, Hiruzen said as he stamped another denied on another useless law attempt. He looked up when the door opened and the young Kenta came in smiling, seeing his grandfather figure. Ah, Kenta-kun, come in. What brings you here so early in the morning? Kenta smiles, closing the door. I thought now would be a good time to come and see you and assumed you'd be less busy in the early morning, he said before eyeing the paperwork. Guess I was wrong. I can come back later if you'd like. Hiruzen smiled at Kenta's cleaver thinking but shook his head. No, that's fine, my boy. I could use the distraction from this paperwork. Hiruzen said as he lifted his pipe. How are you and Naruto faring in your new apartments? I've been meaning to come by, but this paperwork has kept me so busy I can barely get away from my desk these days. Kenta grinned. The apartments are great, Gigi. Thanks again for them. It's so much better to have our own space rather than back at the orphanage when it was just the 2 of us to that small room and single bed. Hiruzen chuckled at Kenta's happiness. That's good to hear, my boy. Now what have you come by so early for? I assume it must be important. You're normally with Naruto every day, like you two were joined at the hip. Kenta smirked, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. Nothing gets by you, Gigi, he said with a nervous chuckle. I was wondering if I could ask you to arrange for mine and Naruto's groceries to be collected by someone else from now on. The sudden request made Hiruzen quirk an eyebrow as he took his pipe from his mouth. And why would you ask for that, Kenta-kun? If you're nervous about going alone, I'm sure I could have someone sent with you until you're sure of how to do it yourself. Hiruzen suggested, thinking he might just have been nervous, but blinked again when Kenta shook his head. That's not it, Gigi, Kenta said with a small frown. It's just that I've noticed something. The last time I went to the shop, the girl at the till charged me way more than what the bill should have been for the food. I made sure to check the prices before I took them to the till, and the looks the girl was giving me and Naruto, they were just cold and full of hate. Hiruzen frowned, hearing that and curse in his head. I was afraid of this. There hasn't been an incident like the first since I put that Anbu unit on them, but it appears that they've found another way to abuse these two. Well, that's stopping now. Hiruzen thought as he sighed. I see. Well, I don't see why we can't arrange that for you. Hiruzen said as he gave Kenta a small smile and took out notepad from his desk drawer. Come and give me a list of all the things that you need and I'll have someone pick them up for you and bring them here while we talk. The longer we talk, the less time I have to work on this accursed paperwork, hee hee. Kenta bowed in thanks as he came over and started listing all the things they needed from the shop. After 5 minutes, Hiruzen nodded and pulsed his chakra into a seal on his desk, and the door to his office opened as his secretary came in. Hiruzen handed her the list. Please have someone sent to purchase those items from one of the local shops and have them brought here, and arrange for it to be done once a week. The secretary took the list and nodded. As she started to leave, she shot a disgusted glare at Kenta, who returned it in kind. Hiruzen caught the secretary's glare and scowled at her. And when you're done with that, you can clear out your desk. Your services are no longer required, he said, scowl still on his face, shocking the secretary, who could only nod in acceptance and leave. Hiruzen rubbed his brow. What is this village coming to? He asked himself mentally. As the door closed, Kenta couldn't help but smirk and turned to his grandfather figure, smiling. Thanks again, Gigi, this will really help. Hiruzen smiled. You're most welcome, Kenta. Always come to me if there's anything you need, I'll be more than happy to help you. Kenta nodded. Actually, Gigi, there is one more thing you could help me with, if it's not too much trouble. Hiruzen chuckled. It's fine, my boy. What is it that I can do for you? Kenta grinned, hoping he wouldn't be turned down. I was hoping you'd be able to lend me a copy of some scrolls on beginner's ninjutsu, taijutsu and chakra control. The sudden request shocked Hiruzen for a moment as he blinked, hearing it. My boy, why would you want such things? You don't start the academy for another 2 years. Kenta nodded. I know, Gigi, it's just I want to get a head start on the basics so I don't fall behind. I'm thinking that all the students from clans will have training from their parents before going, so I'll already be at a disadvantage. I want to lessen that as much as possible. Hiruzen looked at Kenta, shocked at his logical thinking, and couldn't help but smile. It's almost as if it's Minato standing in front of me defending his reasoning. They're so much alike it's almost scary. Hiruzen thought before nodding. Very well, Kenta-kun. I'd be more than happy to help you, he said before getting up. Hiruzen walked over to the bookshelves and started scanning their contents before pulling out 2 scrolls. Here we go, he said as he turned and handed them to Kenta. That first one is on the 3 types of chakra control exercises for beginners. I'd recommend starting with the leaf balancing exercise before moving on to tree climbing and water walking, Hiruzen recommended. The second is on the 3 basic ninjutsu all students learn at the academy: Bunshin, Kawarimi, and Henge. These 3 are the fundamental basics that every shinobi must know. That's why the academy teaches them. Hiruzen continued explaining. Now as for taijutsu, that would be better studied under a sensei. That way you can discover a style which is suited to your own personality, and it just so happens that we have a taijutsu expert here in the village. He is a master of the Goken, strong fist taijutsu style and is fluent in over 30 other forms of hand-to-hand combat. I believe he would be best to teach you when the time comes. Kenta couldn't help but shiver. Gigi, he wouldn't be the guy I've seen running around the village screaming about the flames of youth, is he? Hiruzen's sweat dropped. That would be him. His name is Might Guy, and while he may be a little eccentric, make that completely insane, but he is also one of the most hard-working jonin this village has, and would be the best option in learning any taijutsu style. Kenta nodded, understanding his grandfather figure's logic, but couldn't help but think that his future taijutsu lessons might prove to be rather strange. Then another thought crossed Kenta's mind. Gigi, where do I go to get other jutsu? After I've learned these three, that is. Hiruzen smiled. Common jutsu that many shinobi use can be found at the shinobi library. Clans have their own personal libraries in their compounds, so the shinobi library is for non-clan shinobi to go to or for clan shinobi to research jutsu that might better their clan styles. Sadly, I'm afraid you won't be able to enter as you need to be a registered shinobi of Konoha to do so. Kenta frowned, hearing that he had really hoped to go there after he had learned these three jutsu he had been given. Seeing Kenta frown, Hiruzen smirked slightly as if reading his mind. Don't worry, my boy, when the time comes that you need more jutsu to learn, I'll draft you up a permit to allow you to enter the library, and I'll even assign you a training ground to practice in, as long as you can show me you've learned all three of those jutsu I've given you, that way I'll know you can handle the jutsu in the library. Kenta smiled again, hearing that, realizing what his grandfather figure was doing. He was giving him incentive to learn the academy basic jutsu before the others so he wouldn't take on something that was above his level. Thanks, Gigi. This will be perfect. I have to get stronger and be ready. I can't be defenseless, not when I have to protect Naruto. Kenta thought as he smiled. Thanks, Gigi. I'll get these jutsu down, no problem, but I was wondering if you could spare someone to show me the ropes in how to start, even if they're just out of the academy. I just want a hand to make sure I'm not making a fool out of myself by doing it wrong. Hiruzen smiled. That's a very clever thing to ask, Kenta, he said in praise before thinking for a moment. Perhaps I could kill two birds with one stone with this, at least for now. She's been refusing to take anyone for the past 2 years, not wanting a genin team. Perhaps a single student would be better. Hiruzen smirked. And I believe I know just the person to help you, he said before snapping his finger, and an Anbu guard appeared to his left. Please fetch Anko Mitarashi for me, he ordered before the Anbu bowed and disappeared via Shunshin. Kenta blinked at the speed of how things were going. Wow, that was easy. I knew I would get someone, but I never thought it'd be so quickly. I hope whoever this Anko is can help me. Kenta thought to himself, only to be pulled from his shock by a knock at the office's door. Come in, called Hiruzen to whoever it was. The door opened and two people came in. One was an Anbu wearing a boar mask holding multiple bags of groceries. The second was a young woman in a white high-collar shirt and black mesh armor over the top of it, wearing a brown skirt with a purple side pouch and black shinobi sandals, with white wrappings around her left thigh under a black kunai pouch. The Anbu set the groceries down beside Kenta before bowing to Hiruzen and disappearing into a swirl of leaves. The girl gave Kenta a curious glance before she stood in front of the Hokage's desk and bowed. You sent for me, Hokage-sama, she said, taking her formal tone. This was the professor, and Shinobi no Kami, you showed him respect. Hiruzen nodded and gave them both a smile that for some reason sent a shiver down both their spines as both gulped, unsure of why they felt a little worried about what was going to happen. Hiruzen chuckled slightly. Glad to know I still got it. He though before smiling again. Anko, I have a long-term assignment for you with continuous pay for as long as it continues, given that it's non-optional at this stage, the professor informed her, making her frown somewhat. Kenta raised an eyebrow at the statement. So he's making teaching me a mission, and a non-optional one at that. Why, hasn't she taught anyone before? She doesn't even look 17. Kenta thought, as he looked to the girl, curious as to whom she was exactly. Hiruzen then cleared his throat. Kenta, this is Anko Mitarashi. Anko, this is Kenta Uzumaki, your new student. Hiruzen said with a smile. That was when Anko's eyes widened in realization of why this mission was non-optional for her. Hokage-sama, are you sure this is wise, saddling me with this gaki? Anko asked, trying to be as polite as possible about it. He doesn't even look old enough to be out of dippers yet. What exactly do you want me to teach him? How to use crayons? Anko asked, as she couldn't help glancing at Kenta with a smirk. That was when Kenta's eye twitched and a smile came to his face that was similar to the one Anko glanced at him with. Firstly, it's very nice to meet you as well, Mitarashi-san, but I feel like I must point out, should you call me that again, you will find one of those kunai in your holder shoved up somewhere on your person that you would find most unpleasant, or maybe you wouldn't, given how you look. The sudden outburst made both Hiruzen and Anko blink, looking at Kenta. Hiruzen was shocked. Kenta had always been polite and well-mannered, always keeping himself calm. There was a time he actually, though there was some hyuga in him to be so stiff at times, to see him actually react like that was a revelation, and one that brought a cheerful smile to the old man's mental face. And there's the Kushina in him. She was never one for taking lip from anyone. Oh, these two will make quite the pair if they get into it. Hiruzen smirked. Anko blinked, looking at Kenta before a smirk of approval came to her, and she laughed. Ha ha, that's some mouth you got on you there, Gaki. Call me Anko, and don't bother with the sensei honorific. I'm waiting to see what you're like first before I even think about making it official, and that, she added as she held out her hand to him. Kenta smirked. Sure thing, Anko-san, he said as he took her hand and shook it. Hiruzen smiled, seeing them getting on. Well, seeing that you're acquainted now, I might as well give you the full assignment, Anko, he said before he cleared his throat and took out a mission scroll. Anko, you are to be Kenta's instructor for the next 2 years in the shinobi arts. You'll still be doing missions outside of the village every once in a while when needed, but when able you are to instruct Kenta in his training for the academy. What he wants to learn is up to him. It seems he already has some ideas in mind and will need directions. I recommend you add physical conditioning to the agenda before you start anything more physical. Hiruzen continued as he wrote everything he said down. I will be arranging for Guy to meet with you both when he gets back from his mission so that he might help Kenta choose a taijutsu style that he can begin learning. Anko, as a newly appointed chunin, passing on knowledge is also a vital role. I expect a monthly report on Kenta's progress. Pay for the assignment will be made weekly. It is a B rank assignment, so pay will be distributed as fit as it is continuous. Training expenses will be covered, so be sure to keep receipts, and if he still requires extra instruction after the 2 years, the assignment will be extended on request. Hiruzen finished as he signed the scroll, making the assignment official as he handed it to her. Anko took the scroll with a nod of acceptance and understanding as she stowed it in her side pouch for review later as Kenta grins. Hiruzen grins also. Alright, now that's sorted, Kenta, you'll need some staring gear. Kunai and shuriken for now, Hiruzen said as he started filling out another scroll. The tower has a large armory, so instead of buying them all, just assign you a set of each to get you started. You'll have to buy your own once you start the academy. It also has a wide assortment of weapons down there. I'd recommend you pick one to try and learn. Most shinobi have something that makes them unique in battle. Perhaps you'll find one down there that you'll like, he said as he handed the second scroll to Anko. Give that to the girl at the armory desk and she'll see you're sorted. Now go on, the sooner you start the sooner you'll grow stronger. Kenta grins as he picks up the bags. Thanks, Gigi, he said as he and Anko began to leave, bags split between them. Hiruzen smirks. Anytime, Kenta, anytime, he says as he watches the pair leave and the door close before he sighed. The council will kick up a storm about this if they find out, but to hell with them. I'm not the Hokage for nothing, he thinks before looking back to the pile of paperwork and glares at it. Alright, you son of a bitch, round 2, here we go, he thinks before starting in again. As Kenta and Anko start to walk away, they pass an Anbu in a weasel mask with black hair coming through the hallway heading to the Hokage's office. As he and Kenta pass each other, Kenta stops and he feels a chill go down his spine as he turns to look at the back of the Anbu as he enters the Hokage's office, and he feels himself shiver again. Anko turns to see Kenta has stopped. Hey Gaki, what's the matter? She asked, wondering why he'd stopped. Turning back to Anko, Kenta shook his head. Nothing, Anko-san, it's just, I have a feeling that something bad is going to happen, he said as they started walking again, Kenta unable to shake the feeling that this day was the start of many things that would shape the future. Scene break. Anko and Kenta walked down to the basement of the Hokage Tower where the armory was located. Entering the room, Kenta's eyes widened considerably, seeing the room. Racks upon racks of weapons of all shapes and sizes, from exotic swords to spearheads. The walls had heavier weapons mounted on them: maces, axes, huge swords. There were weapons of all kinds down here. The sheer number of them astounded him. Wow, this is way more than I expected. Where do all these come from? Kenta asked in awe. Anko smirked. From other shinobi, of course. The village has its fair number of blacksmiths as well. Any time a shinobi comes head to head against an enemy shinobi in battle, the victor usually takes whatever they can from the other in order to better the village and learn other villages' secrets. There's a whole division on solely experimenting and testing foreign weaponry that are brought in to discover their secrets. Once all the secrets have been learned, the weapons are sent here along with all the notes on how they can be used. It's up to the shinobi who decide to take them on to learn how to use them. Usually it's only chunin of above who are given weapons out of here. Hokage-sama must think you're something special to allow you to have one when you're just starting your training. Kenta nods as he looks up at all the weapons, in his mind racing with all the ideas of what he could choose for his weapon. Anko smirked, seeing the look in his eyes like a normal kid in a candy or toy store. Well, to Kenta this probably was a toy store, an incredibly dangerous toy store. She giggled sadistically to herself, wondering what weapon the kid would choose to make his own, and decided to let him run loose. Alright Gaki, I'll head to the desk and get your standard equipment. You go have a look around and see what you can spot that you like. I'll catch up with you in a few. Anko smirked when she saw his grin grow before he took off down the aisle like a Raiden jutsu, making Anko chuckle again. Ought to be that young and excitable. That kid's going to be one hell of a shinobi when he's older if he's this excited now. With Kenta. Kenta walked down the aisles of weapons, his eyes wide, looking up at them all. Sword of all different sizes racked on the wall or mounted separately higher up. There was a mass of maces and long-handled weapons against one of the wall, making Kenta stop and look at them. He remembered the old man had said he practiced using a bow staff as his weapon of choice one time, and had even signed the monkey contract to that extent. The Sarutobi clan even had its own bow fighting style, which Kenta had said sounded awesome. But the more he thought about what his grandfather figure had said, most shinobi have something that makes them unique in battle. Perhaps you'll find one down there that you'll like, had made him reluctant to choose a bow. If he was going to be unique, he had to choose something else. While it would have been nice to have learned how to use it as his student, it wouldn't make him unique. Turning away from the bow staffs, Kenta headed down another aisle that caught his eye. The entire side of the wall had different pull-out boxes in it. Each looked to be for a separate weapon, and on the front was notice of the weapon's name and origins. As Kenta kept walking down, he stopped when he saw something that caught his eye. A label that read, "Unknown Origins," making Kenta blink as he pulled it out and took off the lid. Inside the box was a very strange-looking weapon of sorts. It was clearly a sword by looking at the handle, but its body was broken up into multiple connecting parts. The handle was broke into 10 segments, each part with a rough leather outer wrapping, but the blade looked to be made up of over 100 parts, each of which were connected by a strange extending ball joint. The end of the handle had a large metal ring with 2 smaller ones hanging off it, and the tip of the blade came to a curved point like an arrowhead. Lifting the handle out of the box to examine it, Kenta gripped the blade slightly, and his eyes widened when all the connection on the blade and handle reacted and connected together in an instant as it took on the form of a solid sword. It was just over 1.5 meters in length, with no guard, and a double-edged blade with a clear bevel up the middle of the blade where the segmented joints were clearly visible. Turning the blade so the light glimmered off the blade's edges, Kenta was in awe. It was heavy but not overly so, and it felt right in his hands. As he examined it, footsteps approached him from behind before Anko's voice broke the silence. "See anything you like, Gaki?" she asked, coming up behind him, seeing him admiring the sword. Kenta nodded. This. he said as he tilted the blade slightly as she looked it over. Anko quirked an eyebrow looking at the sword before she reached into the box and took out the booklet on the blade's details and started thumbing through it. Interesting, says here its origins are unknown, that it was found on mission with no direct village links. The blades and connecting links are all chakra metal, so you'll be able to run your chakra through it later. Talk about an expensive piece. Whoever lost this must be kicking themselves still. Chakra metal ain't cheap. Kenta looked the blade up and down again with a newer admiration and grinned. I'll take it, he said with determination, making Anko smirk. You bet you will, but that thing's going to take more than 2 years to learn how to use properly. There's no style as far as I know on this type of sword, so you'll have to make your own. You up for that? Anko asked with a smirk, wanting to see Kenta's reaction. Kenta grinned. Like you said, you can bet I am, I'll make it all my own. Anko smirked. I think I'm starting to like you, Gaki, she said before turning. Now come on, we need to get this assigned to you before we drop off your shopping and then get you some new clothes. You can't train in civilian clothing, it will be shredded in the first hour. Anko smirked as Kenta shivered, unsure what they would be doing that would shred his clothing. Scene break. Back in the double apparent that Kenta and Naruto shared, Kenta and Anko set the bags down on the tabletop as Anko started looking around the place. Nice digs you got here, Gaki. You live here with anyone else? Anko asked, looking around. Kenta nodded as he started putting stuff away. Yep, me and my Ototo. We're twins, but you wouldn't know it by looking at us. I have red hair and he has blonde. After a few minutes, Kenta had finished putting the shopping away and looked to the other equipment. Anko had picked him up 3 kunai and half a dozen shuriken, each were razor sharp. He picked up one of the kunai and held it in his hand, weighing it, and frowned doing so. It was heavy in his hand. Anko noticed him weighing the kunai and smirked. It will be heavy for someone not used to holding one. You'll get used to it in no time, she said, standing up from the table chair. Kenta nodded as he set the kunai down. I never did like how these were designed. No guards and perfect for quick slashes, but not much else. I guess I'll have my sword for those kinds of fights. Anko shrugged. Yay, and you can always go to a blacksmith and request a custom design if you wanted, though they'd cost you an arm and a leg and they'd have to be aerodynamic for throwing, otherwise they'd be useless. She explained as Kenta put the weapons into one of the bags. Right, come on Gaki, time to go and get you kitted out like a proper shinobi. Kenta's eye twitched. I swear if you call me that one more time, I'll make good on my threat from before and shove a kunai up your. Anko stopped, turned to him and smirked. We'll see. Where'd a kid like you even learn that kind of language in the first place? Kenta rolled his eyes. You get enough foul comments thrown your way, you pick up how to throw them back. Kenta explained, causing Anko to blink, not sure what to make of that statement. Were his folks abusive or something? Is that why he and his brother live here? Anko thought to herself as she tried to piece together what she knew about her new charge as they start to walk out and onto the streets. Scene break. It was several minutes until they had arrived at one of the several shinobi clothing stores throughout the village. As they walked in, Kenta frowned, seeing the cold glare the girl behind the till was giving them as they entered and started to look around. Picking out some clothes, Kenta took them into the dressing area and started to try them on while Anko waited outside, tapping her foot, waiting impatiently. You done yet, Gaki? She called out after Kenta had been in for a few minutes. The curtain pulled back and Kenta stepped out wearing a pair of baggy combat trousers with multiple pockets and a black mesh shirt over a white t-shirt and 2 black elbow pads. Now that's more like it, you're looking like a proper shinobi now. Anko said, grinning, seeing his new attire. Kenta's eyebrow twitched again. I look like a mini male version of you. Kenta yelled, looking at the outfit she'd picked out for him. And why is that a bad thing? Anko laughed as Kenta stormed back into the changing room. I'm keeping the pants, but the rest is gone. Kenta called out as the mesh shirt and t-shirt came over the railing onto a grinning Anko's head. After 3 more minutes, Kenta emerged from the changing room again, this time wearing a dark red shirt almost brown with a black shinobi flat jacket over it unzipped, still wearing the black elbow pads from before with a black mask wrapped around his neck with a red strip going down the left side of it. He had swapped out the open-toed shinobi sandals for boots and had donned a pair of shin and knee guards over the baggy pants that were the same shade red as his shirt with a single black stripe down their middle, and he completed his outfit with a pair of fingerless black gloves with metal-plated backs and knuckles. Fixing his gloves as he came out, Kenta grinned, "I think this is more my style." Anko smirked, looking him up and down, nodding in approval. "Not bad, the shinobi look sweets Yugaki. Now come on, let's go pay and get some extras of that outfit ordered before we get started on your training," Anko said, gesturing to the till. As they both approached, the girl glared at both Kenta and Anko coldly as they went to pay. Kenta glared back but was confused as to why Anko was getting the glare as well. Why her too? Is it because she's with me or something? Kenta thought to himself as Anko paid. Walking out of the shop, Anko started to look at the receipt given and slowly her frown turned into a scowl and then total rage. What the hell? Anko yelled as she checked the receipt again. That bitch, I knew there was something off about those numbers. She charged me 3 times the price for all that. Oh, that tears it, I'm going to kill her. Anko yelled as she went to go back to the shop and rip the fake tits off that girl, only to stop when Kenta spoke. Don't bother, Kenta said as he started to put his kunai and shuriken into his pants pockets. Like hell she ripped me off, I'm not about to let that slide, Anko said in anger. Kenta shook his head. You'll be getting refunded for the mission, won't you? So what does it matter? Once you show the receipt to Gigi, that girl will have all the explaining to do then. You won't have to lift a finger, besides it's happened to me before. Anko looked to Kenta confused as to what he meant, thinking that she'd been the reason they'd been overcharged due to her history with a certain snake, but decided not to push. Fine, Anko sighed as they started to continue on their way. I suppose you're right. You're too smart for a gaki your age sometimes, you know that. Kenta shrugged as he took out his sword from the bag. That's just the way I am, he said before he swung the flat of the blade at his waist as it wrapped around him 3 times before the tip of the sword and the ring on the handle connected as the magnetic strips he attached to his pants held the blade still, creating a belt. Anko smirked, seeing it. That thing is going to come in pretty handy. You'd better take good care of it and make sure to read up on all the notes the research division made on it if you want to master how to use it. Kenta nodded. I've already started, he said as he gestured to the pocket on his left shin where the book was sticking out. I covered the first 5 pages before we got to the shop and I've already got some idea of a style I want to try. Anko smirked. You've still got a long ways to go before you can even start on creating a style. First things first, we've got to whip you into shape, she said with a sadistic smirk, making Kenta shiver again. Scene break. The two stood at the edge of a river in a clearing just north of the Hokage monument. Past the trees above, the area was relatively flat with a slope just before the tree line, giving them everything they'd need for Kenta's training, as Anko had put it. Trees for the chakra control, leaf balancing and tree climbing, the river for water walking, space to have light combat spars and practice jutsu, plenty of tall trees to use as a on-the-go battle area later, plus it was secluded and no one would disturb them. Once they had arrived, Anko had set up a privacy barrier around the place for secrecy, as it had mentioned to do on the mission scroll. Hiruzen didn't want anyone to find out about Kenta being trained for as long as he could help it. Anko could guess one reason was that the council would start yelling about her history and how she shouldn't be a shinobi, much less teach a child, or as they would call it, corrupt an innocent mind, when in actuality that was only one of the few reasons they'd complain. Alright Gaki, so what's the first thing on your to-do list for training? Well, work on it before we get started on your physical conditioning, Anko explained. Kenta nodded. The 3 academy jutsu, Gigi said I have to learn them before I can get into the library to get more to learn. Anko slouched. Great, figured he'd saddle you with something boring like those 3. They're the easiest to learn, that's why they teach them at the academy. So I take it you've never used chakra before them either? Kenta shook his head, getting Anko to sigh again. Okay, then that's where we'll start, but before that, this is one and only chance I'm giving you to drop out now, if not, I'm going to train you into the ground each day. We'll be training 10 hours a day, I'll be picking you up at 10 every morning, so I expect you ready. We work till 1 in the evening where we break for lunch, then we'll be blitzing till 8 at night. There's no arguing, as it was part of the assignment scroll Hokage-sama gave me, and you'll need those 10 hours a day practice if you want to be any good in just 2 years training. Kenta nodded his head in determination. I'm not backing down, I wanted this training for a reason, and I won't quit no matter what. Anko smirked at the fire behind his eyes. This kid talks a big game, but let's see if he can back it up. I bet he caves within the week. Anko thought before nodding. Alright, let's get started then, she said, still smirking. Kenta nodded before pausing for a second. Before we start, Anko-san, I was wondering, just how old are you? Anko raised an eyebrow at the question before smirking. I'm 18 Gaki. I graduated my Chunin exams first try, and I'll be expecting the same thing from you in 4.5 years' time when your exams come around. Now let's begin your let's begin your training, she said with a rather disturbing smile, making Kenta gulp. Scene break. It was the day's end as Kenta dragged himself back to his and Naruto's apartments. Every joint in his body hurt after the day's training. Once he'd figured out how to access his chakra, Anko had started him on the leaf balancing exercise for a few hours before he'd started tree walking. Anko had explained the better your chakra control, the easier it was to learn jutsu. He'd made it 3 feet up the tree but had fallen so many times he was sure the bruises on his had bruises. Then after lunch, Anko had begun the real torture, training his physical conditioning. This was to help improve his stamina so he could last in long fights or handle the long travel distances for missions. Now most would have just had Kenta run laps of the training ground. Well, Anko isn't most people. While Kenta was running, he had her chasing him with Senbon needles, laughing her off as she launched them at him for training, and he had to duck, dodge, weave, swerve and jump to get away from them, and that had went on for 4 hours with no breaks. Luckily the Senbon were blunted so they only left small little bruises, but it had still pissed Kenta off something bad by the end, but he was too sore and exhausted to try and take revenge. He was tempted to arrange to set her up to be the victim of one of his and Naruto's pranks, but decided against it, realizing if she could do this to him with blunt Senbon, what would she do to both him and Naruto with sharpened ones? Opening the door to his apartment, he left like his wrist was about to snap from the acrobatics he had to do to get away from the Senbon in training, and hissed in pain, "Me and my big mouth." Kenta hissed as he opened the door, only to get knocked on his as he entered by a blonde blur. Groaning in pain as he lay on the floor, Kenta looked to see what had knocked him over, only to see Naruto on his chest. "Odoto, what the hell? Why'd you?" Kenta started before stopping, hearing sniffling coming from Naruto as his brother looked to him, showing the tears in his eyes. "Ni-chan, I was so worried. I haven't seen you since you left this morning. When I got back the cupboards were full, but I couldn't find you anywhere. I thought. Naruto cried in relief. That's when it hit Kenta and he cursed himself mentally. It had been a few years, but the scars of that night were still there for them both. They'd been chased through the village by a mob when the head of the orphanage had locked them out on their birthday. They'd been trapped in an alleyway, and Kenta had used his body to shield Naruto as the villagers attacked them. He'd been hospitalized for a week after. Kenta hugged Naruto back. "I'm sorry for making you worry, Odoto. I'm sorry for being so stupid. I was just so excited to start my training I forgot to let you know. Gigi assigned me an instructor after he gave me some scrolls. I'll be training with her most days from now on, but I'll still be here in the mornings and evenings after 8, and I'll have weekends off so we can spend time together all those times. You'll just have to prank the villagers while I'm away those 10 hours a day." Naruto frowned hearing that. He didn't like being away from his Ni-chan, but he didn't want to get in the way of his dreams either. He knew it was his dream to be a strong shinobi to protect them both, but he wouldn't be left behind. Smiling at his brother, he laughed slightly. He. I thought it was something like that. I know you want to be a shinobi, so once we start the academy I'm going to get strong too, and I'll get just as strong if not stronger than you, Ni-chan, and then I'm going to beat you. Kenta smirked at his brother, brightened up and laughed at the statement. In your dreams, maybe, Odoto. The only way you'd beat me is if you took Gigi's hat and became Hokage yourself. Naruto grinned back at his brother. Then that's what I'll do. I'll become Hokage and beat you, Ni-chan, believe it. Kenta blinked at the sudden statement and smiled. Big brother to the Hokage, yay, I think I can settle for that. Kenta thought before nodded. Alright then, Odoto, you're on. Both brothers smirked at each other, and from that day their paths were set. In the forest area beyond the Hokage monument, two blurs could be seen deep inside, traveling at high speeds as one clearly chased the other. The red blur flies ahead of the purple one at a faster rate before pulling a turn and swings behind a tree as the purple blur continues on. After several seconds, Kenta Uzumaki sticks his head out from behind the tree as he tried to catch his breath. I swear that woman is mental and needs to be far away from any and all kinds of pointy objects for everyone's safety, Kenta thought to himself as he slowly felt himself getting his breath back. He was about to take off again only to stop when the silent sound of objects cutting through the air caught his attention, followed by three soft thuds before Kenta lost his balance and fell off the branch he was on, showing the three Senbon needles in his back, but before he hits the ground he disappears in a puff of smoke, leaving a log in his place. Anko then lands on the branch just a bit higher up, looking down with a smirk. Nicely done with the substitution, I almost thought I had you there for a second, she said as Kenta dropped down from the canopy above onto his original branch, looking up at the snake user with a smirk. Thanks, you almost would have if I hadn't heard them at the last second, Kenta said with sigh. He knew it had just been luck. He knew if she'd thrown them at the real chakra enhanced speed he'd have been dead. Both Anko and Kenta turned in the direction of the now splintered log on the ground as both put their hands together and bowed. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten, he said in a grateful tone, only to jump off the branch the next second, dodging another set of Senbon needles. Grabbing the handle of his sword around his waist, he pulls it free before thrusting it forward as the blade extends out as it spears a tree. Then in a fluid motion Kenta pulls on it, launching himself forward, pulling the sword out of the tree as he shot past it with Anko hot on his tail as the chase begins anew. Ducking under another three needles, Kenta started to weave hand signs before he called out mentally, Bunshin no Jutsu, as the entire area in front of Anko was clouded in smoke, and as she jumped through it she smirked as she counted 10 Kenta copies jumping from branch to branch in front of her. Not bad, Anko called as she raced after them, trying to buy yourself some time to find another spot to slip away. She mused as she took out another handful of Senbon needless with a grin. Sorry, but that's not going to work, she said before jumping higher into the air and raining the Senbon needles down with deadly accuracy on all the clones, only for all of them to disappear. Anko immediately stops on a branch and scowls. Little brat actually gave me the slip, must have been the clone's smoke cloud when he took off. He gets points for creativity, I give him that, she mused as she was about to turn to track him down, only to stop when she saw movement as Hiruzen came around one of the trees as he looked up. Ah, there you are, Anko, Hiruzen called up to her. I just came out to see how Kenta was progressing. Where is? Hiruzen started to ask as Anko drops down onto the ground, but before he could finish she was on him with a kunai drawn, about to run him through. Nice try with the Hengaki, but I'm not going to fall for. Anko grinned, thinking she'd got him, only to be shocked when the Hokage turned into smoke, making her eyes go wide. A Bunshin, she said in shock, only to freeze feeling the cold metal of Kenta's sword at the back of her neck, and she smirks. Nice one, a Bunshin with a henge, I didn't even sense you using chakra, you're getting better. Kenta smirked. Thanks, I figured I needed to pull something like that to get you to lower your guard for a second before I could take advantage. The Bunshin and henge traps seem to fit the bill, he said as he took his sword away from her neck as Anko stood up. And I walked right into it, Anko said, shaking her head. I must be losing my touch training you these past 3 months, but damn if it hasn't been worth it to see you grow. You learned those jutsu in no time flat, and then you used them in a combat situation. I'm almost impressed, she said as a smirk crossed her face. Kenta smirked. Well, with a senseis, or rather slave drivers, like you and Guy-san drilling me into the ground every day, it's hard not to get good. Anko laughed. Hey, I'm not as bad as that spandex-wearing freak, but I think it's safe to say that between the two of us we've whipped you into shape. Your chakra control could use some work and you can't make any less than 10 clones at a single time, but that's a given due to your huge chakra reserves. However, I think we can get it to Jonin level control by the time you start the academy, and I think it's safe to say you've got those academy jutsu down flat. What did eyebrows say about your taijutsu? Kenta's sweat dropped. Well, removing all the flames of youth comments, he said, I'm at an acceptable level for someone my age. I've got the academy style down flat, and he says he has a few styles that might be a good fit for me and that he'll be bringing some scrolls of them to our next training session in a week's time. Anko nodded and was about to speak when a third voice cut through the moment's silence. Well, it certainly sounds like things are progressing well in your training, Kenta-kun, spoke Hiruzen as he came around one of the trees. Anko bows, seeing the Hokage, and Kenta smirked before doing the same. Hey Gigi, what brings you all the way out here? Hiruzen smiled. Well, I just came out to check on your progress, but when I came into sight the first thing I saw was Anko attacking what looked to be a bunchen of myself. Just what are you two training out here for, pray tell? Hiruzen asked, raising an eyebrow. Both Anko and Kenta rubbed the backs of their heads sheepishly. Sorry Gigi, I needed a transformation that could at the least be viable for someone who would come out here. Guy-san is away on that mission and you're the only other person that knows we're out here. Hiruzen chuckled at Kenta's reasons. I understand, my boy, no harm done, and it was a very clever plan. I can see Anko-chan's reports on you haven't been wrong. You certainly have come a long way in the past 3 months. I'd even say you're beyond any academy student's level by now to be able to keep a Chunin shinobi like Anko here running for over an hour and perform all academy jutsu. I'd make you genin right now if there wasn't a mountain of paperwork involved with early admissions. Both Anko and Kenta sweat dropped at that statement. Kenta then grinned. Thanks Gigi, I hope this means you're going to let me into the shinobi library now that I've got the basics down. I really want to see what jutsu there are. Hiruzen chuckled. Of course Kenta-kun, I've had your permit and a training ground ready for you ever since Anko's last report. I knew you wouldn't take long. Hiruzen said as he took out a card and scroll out from inside his robes before tossing them to Kenta. The card will allow you access to the shinobi library, and the scroll is an all-access permit to Training Ground 43 beside the Forest of Death, which is rarely used due its proximity to the forest, which Anko has taken to making her own personal training ground. Anko grinned. Yep, no better place to have some fun. Feel free to drop in. I can guarantee it will be quite the experience. Anko said as she leaned on Kenta's shoulder with a grin. Man, I can't wait to see what you're going to be like in 21 months. You'll be ripping it at the academy. Heck, you might be the next first-year graduate since that Itachi. Kenta frowned and shook his head. No, I won't be. I intend to hold back my skills at the academy as best I can, Kenta announced, which brought looks of shock and confusion to Anko and Hiruzen's faces. But why would you want to do that, Kenta? Hiruzen asked. Yay, wasn't all this meant to be about becoming a shinobi sooner? Anko asked after. Kenta shook his head. In a way, yes, but in the most part it's just preparation. I want to be able to protect myself and Ododo, and I can only do that if I'm close to him as much as possible. If I graduated early, I'd be a genin, and likely within 2 years a chunin. All the time doing missions in rank C or above will likely take me away from the village and Ododo too. I can't let that happen, Kenta said before he gave Hiruzen a pleading look. I'm sure you've noticed by now, Gigi, the cold, unfeeling looks we both get from everyone else in the village. I don't know what is pushing these feelings, but if I were to be away on missions while Ododo was here in the village, he'd be all alone sometimes for weeks at a time, or maybe even months, and he'd be all alone. I couldn't do that to him even if it is to keep him safe. So I realized I'm going to be staying in the academy as a student until we both come out at the same time. That way we can both be on the same team and do missions together, or at the very least by then he'll have comrades that can help him and be friendly with, so he won't be so lonely. Hiruzen smiled, nodding in understanding. Everything he was doing was for his brother's safety, and Hiruzen couldn't have been more proud of Kenta's way of thinking. He could see the fire burning behind his young eyes. It burned to protect the ones he cared for, his brother and those close to him, and it was the fire that would never go out. With a grin, Anko grappled Kenta into a playful headlock, laughing to herself. "Ah, who knew you were such a little softy Gaki?" Anko teased as they wrestled. In the headlock, Kenta growled in irritation as his hand immediately went to his pocket, and in a fast draw Kenta pulled out a kunai and in one fluid motion jabbed it into Anko's skirt covered behind. The snake charmer's eyes then shot open wide before she shot up comically into the air, her hand holding her as she lets out a scream of "OWWWWWWW," which caused all birds in the trees to take off into the sky. Kenta just twirled the kunai around his finger before smirking as he returned it to his pocket. "I warned her, another comment on my height or age, and I'd be sticking a kunai up her." Hiruzen chuckled slightly. "That you did, my boy. Now Kenta-kun, are you sure you want to hold back in the academy? Other students may see you as a weakling and try to take advantage of that." Kenta just gives a little chuckle. "Let them try, Gigi. When I say I'll be holding back, that doesn't mean by a lot. I'm going for the Rookie of the Year slot at the end of it all, but it will be after the 4 years." As Kenta finished speaking, Anko finally came back to the ground. "WWWW." Before crashing back into the ground, still rubbing her backside. "Gaki. That hurt," she yelled in anger before tossing 3 kunai at him. Kenta shocked both Anko and Hiruzen by reacting faster than they thought he could and caught all 3 in midair with a smirk. Before dropping them, "I'll be taking the rest of the day off today. I want to go check out the library and make sure Ototo isn't getting himself into any trouble. I'll stop by your office after the library, Gigi, if I have any questions." "Not a problem, Kenta-kun," Hiruzen said as he waved to the boy as he walked off back towards the village. Anko got up, still rubbing her backside. "Damn, that Gaki can't take a joke," she said, walking over to beside the Hokage as her face grew slightly serious. "Are you sure this is wise, Hokage-sama, to allow Kenta to hold himself back just for the sake of his brother?" she asked in concern. Hiruzen sighed and shook his head. "I've never put this forward, but I've never agreed with the graduating age of the academy. If I had my way, it would be admittance at 13 and then graduation only after 5 years, and the curriculum would be a lot harder to strengthen the students. I don't like sending children into battle or into danger, but it seems that's what has to be done. So if a child holds himself back in order to protect someone or until he's ready, I will not force him or her to do otherwise. They should enjoy their lives to the fullest and enjoy their childhoods as long as possible, don't you agree?" Anko gave a small smile and nodded. "Yay, one thing's for sure though, when that Gaki does graduate, he's going to be one hell of a shinobi." Unbeknownst to both of them, hidden high in the trees, they were being watched by a small childlike figure all in black with a plain white mask on his face, with just the kanji for "ne" on its forehead as it mentally took notes on what had just occurred before disappearing into a swirl of leaves. Scene break with Kenta. Coming out of the forest's treeline, Kenta kept walking at a brisk pace, heading right for the cliff's edge, and didn't stop as he stepped over the edge and began to climb down the flat surface with just his feet. That tree climbing exercise really comes in handy, Kenta thought as he began to walk down the face of the cliff. Getting to a reasonable height from the rooftops, Kenta channeled chakra into his legs and pushed off in a jump and landed on the rooftops, his fall braced by chakra as he continued on his way by rooftops to avoid the civilians glaring at him on the streets below. Reaching a junction in the streets, Kenta paused to catch his breath only to hear a loud crash and a bang before a pink smoke filled one of the shops below. Kenta recognized it as one of the shops that had overcharged him and Naruto for their clothing. This confused Kenta for a second before out of the smoke burst his blonde brother, followed by the shopkeeper who was covered in a neon pink paint with glitter and feathers speckling his body. Kenta had to hold in his laughter at the sight of the man and looking at the other spectators. They were doing the same as the man started to give chase to Naruto, yelling and cursing as he went. Though it was difficult to make out given the fact his mouth was filled with paint and feathers. As they approached the junction, Kenta decided to intervene and get his Ododo out of there as he reached into his pocket and took out 3 smoke pellets before taking aim. As both Naruto and the man reached the junction, the smoke pellets hit the ground and in seconds the area was filled with smoke as the red blur of Kenta shot into the smoke and a red and blonde blur shot out, and as the smoke cleared, all that was left was the shopkeeper still covered in paint, feathers and glitter, now getting pointed and laughed at by all onlookers. 3 streets away, Kenta landed in an alleyway as he set Naruto down on the ground as they both started laughing. Ha 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 ha. That was a good one, Ododo, best one yet. Where the hell did you get those feathers from? He looked like a half-cooked chicken. Kenta laughed, holding his gut. Naruto chuckled, leaning against the wall for support. I got them out of the trashed stock from one of the store that sells bedroom quilts. The owner dissed Yame Nays and Tuki Oji's ramen, so I mud-bombed his store earlier and took the feathers from the ruined stock he had to throw out. Hearing the explanation, Kenta shook his head as he calmed down. Damn, you're a resourceful one, Ododo, pranking one fool to get resources to prank another. I'd call you an evil genius if you didn't get caught all the time. Naruto smirked, but how was I not meant to? I had to see it happen and enjoy it, and then I just burst out laughing as soon as it happened. Kenta sighed. Try watching from a distance then, he said as he started walking off. I'm out of training early today, so I'll be home shortly. I just need to make a stop. Gigi finally got me my permit to get into the shinobi library and I want to see what jutsu I can pick to learn. Okay, Ni-chan, I'll see you around. Naruto waved as his brother walked off in one direction and he in the other, trying to think of whom to prank next or if he should get some ramen to celebrate his successful pranks so far. Kenta took to the rooftops again and it soon changed to branches as he hopped through the treeline of the training grounds. The shinobi library was on the other side, so he planned on cutting through to get there. But as he was jumping from branch to branch, a noise caught his attention and he stopped on the last branch and looked in the direction of the noise. It sounded like voices, but there wasn't a training ground in the area they were coming from. Deciding to investigate, Kenta took off in the direction the voices were coming from, as they got louder on his approach. As he reached a small clearing, too small to be a registered training ground by the river, as he dropped out of the treeline and landed in the bushes, seeing 4 kids in the small clearing. 3 boys, each looked slightly older than him, maybe by a year or 2, and judging by their clothing they were civilians, no clan markings. They seemed to be being led by the middle boy, who was bigger than the others and looked a bit older. The 3 of them were crowding around the 4th figure, a girl with long back length, black hair and black eyes. She had gentle features and a small stature, wearing black knee-length shorts and a lighter shade top with a red band around its neck. Looking at her, Kenta could tell one thing: she looked pissed off, and her glare threatening to bust anyone's balls that even looked at her wrong. But it didn't seem to bother the older boys. Kenta listened in as they started again. So you're here again. Why the hell don't you go away? The girl scowled at the 3 boys. Why should we do that, oh high and mighty princess of the Uchiha? One boy laughed. Yay, we don't have to listen to you. This isn't your clan's compound. Another one sneered. No, but I was here first like I always am, and yet you idiots don't seem to get the idea, the girl said with the scowl not dropping. Oh, so we're idiots now, are we? You hear that? This Uchiha thinks she's better than us, the eldest said as he balled his fists. Hardly. Just because of your clan's freaky eyes, you think you're above us regular people, is that it? The other glared. She doesn't even have her Sharingan yet, and she still thinks she's better than us, the third said. Kenta, who was watching from the bushes, raised an eyebrow. Sharingan, that sounds interesting. One more thing to ask Gigi about later, he thought as he watched on. The girl just shook her head in awe of these 3 idiots. Are you 3 just stupid or something? Not once have I said I was better than any of you, but you clearly think I am. I mean, you come here every time to insult me and it's always the 3 of you. What's the matter? Think you can't take me one-on-one? She said with a small laugh. Kenta grinned from the bushes. Girls got fire, he thought as he watched, only for it to turn to a glare as he saw the boys starting to move in on the girl. That's it, I think it's time we teach this Uchiha to watch that mouth of hers. the eldest said as he cracked his knuckles as they started to crowd the girl. That was when Kenta rose from the bushes. Hey idiots, leave her alone, he said, coming out of the bush's glare firmly in place. The three boys turned to him and the girl looked at him in shock, not knowing her had been there this whole time. And who the hell are you supposed to be? The eldest said as he looked to Kenta. Kenta smirked. Just a passerby who dislikes bullies, especially cowardly ones who need to gang up on a girl just to prove a point. The eldest growled in anger and Kenta could see he was pissing him off. That was the plan. An angry opponent is one who is likely to attack first and make the most mistakes. That's when you strike. Anko's word echoed in Kenta's head, and he planned to follow them. It seemed to be going to plan so far, that was until one of the smaller boys spoke. Hey, I know you. You're that Joker's big brother, the one that's always getting into trouble and pissing off the adults, like worthless trash. The one boy quipped, earning Kenta's glare. What did you just say? Kenta said as he started walking forward, keeping the three boys in his line of sight. What did you just call my Odoto? Worthless trash. Just like you. The boy repeated, only to be blindsided by a haymaker he never saw coming as Kenta attacked him with speed, making both other boys jump back as their fiend lands at their feet. Kenta glares at them angrily. I was just going to let you off and tell you to leave this nice girl alone, but now I'm afraid I can't do that, not after you said something so stupid like that. Stupid fools like you who think it's alright to gang up on a girl and then put down my Odoto need to have a lesson beaten into you. Once I'm done with you, you'll think twice about saying anything against my family again, especially since my Odoto will be Hokage one day. Kenta said in all seriousness. He knew Naruto would be, because he would make damn sure it happened. Hearing him, the other two boys just burst out laughing. Ha 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 ha. Yay, right, like that baka can become the Hokage. You must have something screwed with your head, the younger one said. Yay, if that baka brother of yours can become the Hokage, then I'm the Shodai Hokage reborn. The eldest laughed. There's no way gutter trash like him will. He started to say before he suddenly found the wind knocked out of him when Kenta rushed him, eyes full of anger, as he drove his fist into the older boy's gut hard, making him double over and to the ground, clutching his gut. Kenta had included some chakra in the punch to make sure it hurt. No one spoke ill of his Odoto's dream and didn't pay a price. The younger boy's eyes widened as Kenta went for him, throwing a heel kick to the side of his head before he could react, and was sent to the ground like the first two as Kenta glared down at them, his anger controlling him. Shut your mouths. Kenta yelled, making the girl behind him flinch, hearing his anger. I can take a lot of stuff, but when someone insults my family right to my face, that crosses the line. Kenta said, his fists gripping tight in his rage. You call us trash, then what the hell does that make you? The girl watching was in a state of shock. She hadn't seen anyone move like that except her older brother when she saw him training once. But here was this boy her age moving with such speed and strength enough to take on boys 2 or 3 years older was amazing, and the determination in his voice had her mesmerizes. Only one thought was on her mind: who are you? The older boy on the ground snarled at the comment as he reached for his side pocket and took out the kunai he had for practice as he used his other hand to scoop up some dirt from the ground. He'd make this punk pay for this. Then he got up off the ground, throwing the dirt in Kenta's face. The dirt and gravel hit Kenta right in the eyes, blocking his vision. As his hands went to his eyes to rub it away, he heard the elder boy yell. Die, you trash! He called out. Kenta reacted and turned away from where the voice was, but was a moment too slow as he felt a burning sensation on his chin as the older boy's kunai slashed at him. Feeling the burn, Kenta reacted and reached out, grabbing the older boy's hand and pulling him off balance before driving his knee into the boy's gut as he twisted his hand, making him yelp and drop the kunai before falling to the ground, clutching his wrist into his gut in pain. Kenta wiped the dirt out of his eyes as he squinted just in time to see the first boy coming at him with a rock. Kenta just went low to dodge it before bringing his fist up in an uppercut into the boy's chin, knocking him flat on the ground as all three lay groaning. The girl watching looking on in shock seeing the boy that had come to her aid hurt for getting involved as she covered her mouth as she gasped seeing the blood trickling from his chin as he rubbed his eyes. The wound went from just below the right of his lower lip down to the right of his chin and was bleeding heavily. Kenta finished rubbing his eyes though it wasn't really doing much good at this point. He'd need to wash the dirt out but couldn't at the moment. His hand went to the wound on his chin and he hissed as he touched it and felt the pain. Damn it, that stings, he thought as his hand lowered to his waist and gripped the handle of his sword as he undid the magnetic clasp and pulled it from his holds as it snapped into its solid form as he held it out at his side as he turned to the eldest boy and pointed the sword to his throat, who froze seeing the blade for the first time not having noticed it before. So you like blades, hum? Well, how do you like mine? Kenta said with an evil grin on his face, a trait he'd picked up over the months after seeing Anko do it so many times. He twisted the blade slightly as it caught the light from the sun making him look even more fearsome. The boy was shaking as Kenta started taking again, so let's get one thing straight right here and now. If I ever hear you three insulting my family or anyone else again, or if I catch you three back here annoying this girl, well, he said before leaning into the boy's ear as his grin grew more sadistic before he whispered, they won't find your bodies for months, do you catch my drift? He said as the could hear the boy gulp in fear as he stood back up and took his sword away. The boy was still shaking as Kenta grinned, boo. The boy yelped as he clambered to his feet and started to run, his two buddies running away after him yelling as they went. Run. Get away. Tu-san was right, he and his brother are both demons. Hearing that last one, Kenta scowled but just sighed, he'd heard it all before. Turning, he went to the water's edge and splashed some water in his face to try and clean out the dirt from his eyes. The girl frowned hearing what the boys said as they ran away. If anyone's a demon around here, it's them, she thought before she went over to help the boy who had came to her aid. Are you alright? The girl asked coming up behind him. Hee, yay, Kenta said as he finished up. Sorry you had to see me like that. I just can't stand baka like them putting down my only family. He said as he used his sleeve to dry the water away as he turned to her with a smirk. Name's Kenta Uzumaki. The girl frowned slightly. Why was he apologizing? It was those boys who should have been apologizing, and her for letting him get hurt for standing up for her. I'm Sayaka Uchiha. She said before bowing her head. Thank you for helping me. I'm sorry you got hurt. Kenta smirked as B took out one of the large bandages from his pouch, after having stocked up after day 3 of having Anko as a sensei, and covered the wound as he waved her off. Aw, don't worry about it, I've gotten worse in my training. My sensei's a real sadist for that kind of stuff. She says, you can't be a shinobi without getting cut up a little, but I think I prefer her senbon needles to a kunai. Sayaka giggled slightly hearing that. Your sensei sounds kind of scary, but still thank you. If you hadn't come by, I'm not sure what might have happened, she said smiling slightly. Kenta nodded. I take it those three come around here often then? He asked, getting all the information. Sayaka nodded her head. Yay, well, whenever I come here to train in privately at least, she explained. Kenta crossed his arms looking at her confused. Then why don't you train in your clan's compound? You said you were an Uchiha, right? Last I checked you have several training grounds registered to your clan, why come here? Sayaka seemed to frown when she was called an Uchiha, but nodded. That's true, but they're always in use by others in my clan, and my eldest brother is always away training with my older twin brother gone to watch him. Kenta nodded understanding. I see, so what days do you come here to train then? He asked, curious as to how serious she was in her training. Anko had told him about fangirls in the academy fawning over one of the boys in class and not taking their training seriously. He wanted to see if she was likely to be one or if she was going to be a real kunoichi. Sayaka frowned. This day every week, she said, sounding depressed at the fact. The rest of the time my Tu-san has me studying at home. She said, clenching her fist slightly. He doesn't want me to be a kunoichi, saying they're not important and weak. So this is the only place I can come to practice to prove him wrong. The one day a week my Ka-san was able to convince him to let me have off from studying, she said, smiling slightly when she spoke of her Ka-san. Kenta frowned slightly hearing that this was the only time she could train, and scowled hearing what her father had said. Well, I know my Kunoichi-sensei who would love to have him say that to her face and see what happens. But I think I might have a solution to your problem if you're open to it. Sayaka looked hesitant for a moment, but slowly nodded, urging him to continue with his idea. Kenta smirked. How about I help you to train? We could meet up here to train on the days you can get away. Kenta offered. Don't get me wrong, while training by yourself is alright, with no one to help you, your growth will be limited. Plus it means that if those idiots come around again they won't be able to bother you. Though after my little display a few minutes ago I don't think that will be a problem. Sayaka giggled slightly hearing that last part as she started to think on his words. His logic was sound and simple, and it would be nice to have someone to train with her for a change instead of being alone. Okay, I don't see why not, she said with a small smile. Kenta smiled back. Great, I'll see you here next week then, say 9-ish. He offered. I'd stay to train now, but I only just finished my own training and I've got some errands to run before I have to meet someone. Kenta explained before pausing for a second as he turned. Plus I think it would be best if you took at least one of the days your Ka-san got you off to relax. All the training in the world won't help you if you have a mental breakdown from too much stress. Plus you're too cute to not have fun once in a while, he said while walking away. Had he been looking at her he would have noticed the small look of shock she had. Instead he just waved over his shoulder to her. Well Yane, he finished before jumping back into the trees and taking off. Sayaka just stood there watching. She had managed not to react to his last words until he was gone a few seconds, but once he was out of sight a small blush appeared on her cheeks. He thinks I'm cute, she thought as a small happy smile came to her face. Scene break. Walking into the library, Kenta couldn't help but let his eyes trail up as he walked in. The size of the place was baffling to him. He was sure that he'd need a map to navigate the place or risk getting lost in the maze that was the library. Looking to the left side of the library he could see the shinobi section that was caged off for security, and there was a joined office space with a window where the on-duty librarian sat to let people into the section. As Kenta approached the window the girl behind the glass scowled seeing him and stood up glaring at him. Get out, we don't need your kind here, she snapped at him. Kenta didn't flinch and pressed the card to the glass. I don't have time for your BS, lady. See this? It means I have written permission from Hokage-sama to use this library whenever I want. It also means he knows I'm here, so if I go to him now and tell him you refused to let me in, I think he'd be more than willing to find you a cell in T&I to wait in until you've thought up a good reason that Ibiki will believe as to why you're refusing me entry, he said as he returned the glare equally as cold. He knew the threat would work. Everyone in the village knew who Ibiki was, the head torturer of the T&I division where Anko worked. Kenta had actually had the chance to meet the man a month back when he came looking for Anko. Nice enough guy, a little intimidating with his height and scars, but nice nonetheless. The girl continued to scowl at him but couldn't say anything in revoke as she hit the button to open the cage door. Taking his card away, Kenta turned and walked in, checking that there was a release button on the inside so he could enter and not worry about being locked in for hours until the Hokage found him. Walking down the rows of shelved, Kenta was deep in thought. I'd better learn everything I can about the basics first before I try anything, and the basics of all ninjutsu is chakra, so better start there and see if there's anything Anko hasn't taught me about it yet. He thought as he lifted one of the baskets for holding the scrolls and started going through the rows of scrolls slowly, not wanting to miss anything that might be important. Chakra control, I wonder what other methods there are besides the leaf and tree climbing ones. As he put the scroll into the basket and looked to see another scroll, chakra natures, wonder what that's about. He thought as he took down the scroll and put it in his basket before continuing on. After lifting 3 more scrolls on the uses of chakra, Kenta started going down the ninjutsu rows, searching with a fine-tooth comb. As he continued he noticed a scroll entitled, Bunshin and their categories. Taking the scroll down, Kenta looked at it puzzled for a moment. Does this mean there's more than one type of Bunshin other than what I've learned? He thought before opening the scroll and reading the first section, his eyes widening. Interesting, so shinobi can make clones through elements that can fight and aren't just projections. Very interesting indeed. That's another thing to ask Gigi about. He thought as he rolled the scroll up and put it in his basket and looked back down the rows. I need something more than just these few jutsu, something to really make me stand out and give me an edge. Let's see what I can find. He thinks before looking to the more advanced section of the aisles and smirked. Coming out of the aisle a few minutes later, he had his basket fairly full with another 5 scrolls. He had picked up multiple types of jutsu to learn, variations of Kaden fire, and Raiden lighting jutsu with a few assorted Doden earth jutsu and even some sweetened water, and Futon wind jutsu, though he was a little disappointed in the limited selection of Futon and Raiden jutsu they had here, but he'd just have to make do. Gotta see which type one prefer to use. Gigi said that it's good to have variation in jutsu choices, so I'll learn what I can for now. As he started walking into the next aisle, he stopped and noticed the Bukijutsu, weapon techniques, section and smirked. Let's see here, I can't start creating my own style until I've got a grasp of the styles there are out there. So I have a grasp on what I've got to work with when the time comes, and there's no time like the present, he thinks as he walks over and starts his next search. Coming out after 10 minutes, Kenta had a very happy look on his face as several more scrolls filled his basket. Perfect, I should be able to work with these and have a style in no time. It will be practicing it that's going to be the hard part. I think I'll have to see about getting a pair of armored gloves for this. I don't want my hands cut to shreds, he thinks as he walks before a final aisle catches his eyes. The small Iryo ninjutsu medical ninja techniques aisle that he'd almost missed, and a thought came to his head. Well, that could help until I get the gloves, plus it could be interesting to learn, he thought as he walked over and took one of the lower level scrolls after taking a quick peek and walked on. Getting to the booking section, Kenta slotted his many choices into the slot provided and pushed the slot closed only for a storage scroll to roll out the bottom slot with copies of the scrolls he'd booked sealed inside. Taking it, Kenta made a beeline to the exit, eager to get to Hiruzen and ask him the many questions he now had. However, as he left, he missed the cold glare he was getting from the librarian, who watched him go before lifting the phone to make a call. Scene break. After leaving the library, Kenta quickly took to the rooftops and started making his way to the apartment building where he and Naruto lived to drop off his scrolls. Getting there, he opened the scroll and looked through to find one in particular and smirked as he put it on the table in Naruto's apartment and wrote a note and placed it on top that said, "Thought this would help with watching your pranks. We'll work on it tonight when I get back, Ni-chan." The title of the scroll read, Kakurimino no Jutsu, Cloak of Invisibility Technique. Leaving the rest of the scrolls in his apartment, Kenta walked out and took to the rooftops once more, heading for the Hokage's office, his head buzzing with questions that he was eager to get answered. Scene break. Hiruzen sat in his office, his paperwork flow stemmed for the evening as he began to light up his pipe and took a breath before exhaling with a relaxed sigh as he smirked. Not many decide to enter my office that way. I can think of only one, and it seems you're taking up that habit as well now. Hiruzen smirked before looking to the open window to see Kenta sitting there shaking his head. What can I say? I have style. Kenta said, stepping in, before looking at Hiruzen shaking his head again. You know that's bad for your health, Gigi. Hiruzen chuckled. When you get to my age, Kenta, you enjoy the little things, so what questions do you have for? He started but stopped as his gaze settles on Kenta's chin and a small scowl settled in. What happened to your chin, Kenta? That wasn't from training. Kenta shook his head. Teaching some bullies a lesson for picking on those who don't deserve it. I would have let them be, except they decided to run their mouths about Ototo. I couldn't let that go. Just wasn't expecting one of them to throw dirt in my eyes and come at me with a kunai. They ended up worse than I did. He explained as Hiruzen pulled back the bandage, checking the wound as his scowl deepened. It's not deep enough to require stitches, but it will scar. Hiruzen said as he replaced the bandage. Who were they, Kenta? Kenta shook his head. It doesn't matter, Gigi. I made sure to put the fear of Kami into them before scaring them off. They won't be trying it again. Hiruzen was going to try and push for the names again but stopped when he saw the look in Kenta's eyes, steadfast and determined. He knew he wouldn't budge from his decision on the matter. There's that Uzumaki blood again, Hiruzen thought with a mental smirk before sighing. Very well, Kenta, if you're not wanting to press charges then all right. He said as he sat down behind his desk again, so I take it your trip to the library was productive and you have questions. Kenta nodded. A fair few actually. Can you tell me what exactly is this Sharingan I've heard about? I know it's involved with the Uchiha clan, but what exactly does it do? Hiruzen blinked at the sudden and specific question. That's a rather specific question. I'll try to explain it as best I can. You see, Kenta, the Sharingan is what is known as a bloodline limit or Kekkei Genkei. This is a specific ability that is passed down through a person's blood. The Sharingan is one of the few known Kekkei Genkei that presents itself in the user's eyes and is classified as a dojutsu. So what do these Sharingan actually look like then when they're used? Kenta asked. Hiruzen replies, well, when an Uchiha has awakened their Sharingan through an intense situation, their Sharingan will present itself as the Uchiha's iris turns red and 3 black tomos form in a ring. When active, it gives the Uchiha abilities that are what makes the Uchiha clan so powerful, allowing them to see chakra and detect genjutsu with ease, enhanced vision meaning they can read lips and follow extreme movements with ease, and one of the abilities that makes them envious of most shinobi, the ability to copy any ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu with near-perfect accuracy and add it to their own skill sets. So you're telling me they only have to see a jutsu with those eyes and they can copy it perfectly? Kenta said in shock, his mind racing with the possibilities of such a skill. Hiruzen nodded. Yes, as long as they can see the hand signs involved they can copy and perform it, but do not mistake this as mastering a jutsu, Kenta. While they may be able to perform it, they will not be able to compare to one who has practiced the jutsu and mastered it. What do you mean master it? How do you master a jutsu? Kenta asked, trying to figure out what Hiruzen meant. You practice it so long and hard that you are able to perform a jutsu with ease and without hand signs. It takes months of practice, sometimes years, to master a jutsu to that extent, and it's only by that can you truly master a jutsu. That is what I mean. Hiruzen says. Kenta nodded. I see. Even at that, the Sharingan is an extremely potent ability with that skill. Yes, it is, and that is only 3 of its abilities. Others are kept secret by the clan, but one thing that you should know is that should you ever fight one, do not look into their eyes. They have the power to trap you in a genjutsu with a single glance, and like that the fight is over before it even began. Hiruzen said. Kenta gulped slightly. That's just frightening. Not being able to fight while looking at your opponent's face would be tricky. You'd have to keep your eyes down and watch another part to determine their movements like their feet. Hiruzen smirked. Very perceptive, Kenta. Yes, in fact I believe that guy had been learning such a skill himself. He has a rival with one of the other Jonin who has an implanted Sharingan, and so in order to fight him when he uses it, he has learned to fight by watching his opponent's feet. He might teach it to you if you ask. I'll have to do that, Gigi. Just out of curiosity, what other dojutsu are there? You said there were others. Kenta asks. I'll have to do that, Gigi. Just out of curiosity, what other dojutsu are there? You said there were others. Kenta asks. Hiruzen nodded. One is just a legend, but the third belongs to the next strongest clan in Konoha, the Hyuga clan, and their dojutsu, the Byakugan. It presents itself by pulsing veins around the user's eye and grants them extreme visionary abilities, allowing them to see chakra networks and see through solid mass as well as full 360-degree vision, making them great hunters and trackers as no one can hide from them. And lethal in taijutsu with their specialized taijutsu style, the Juken, gentle fist, style that targets their opponent's chakra pathway system by closing their tenketsu points with extreme speeds. Kenta gulped. That would make them tricky to beat. You couldn't sneak up on them, and on top of that they'd be murder at close combat with that style. I hope I never have to fight one in the close future. I'd better start thinking up ways to counter them in fights. Hiruzen chuckled. If you do, be sure to keep it to yourself. I don't think either Fugaku Uchiha or Hiyashi Hyuga would appreciate you telling people how to beat their clansmen, but what has brought on all these questions? Did you read about them in the library? Kenta shook his head. No reason, Gigi. I just overheard someone mention the Sharingan earlier and was curious as all. Actually, I was hoping you could explain about two scrolls, one read on chakra nature and element bunchins. Hiruzen blinked. Those are rather advanced scrolls you're reading, Kenta. Elemental bunchins are Chunin rank and chakra nature is Haijonin. He said before stroking his beard as smirked slightly, but I don't see the harm in explaining some of the basics of those since you're curious. Firstly, let's check your natural affinity is, he said as he opened the lower left drawer of his desk. And how do we do that, Gigi? Kenta asked, seeing Hiruzen reach into the drawer. Hiruzen smirked, taking out a slip of paper. With this, he said, holding out the paper. This is what's known as chakra paper. By channeling your chakra through this paper, it will tell you your elemental affinity. There are 5 types of chakra nature: fire, water, earth, lightning, and wind. Fire turns the paper to ash, water makes it soggy, earth turns it to dust, lightning crumples it, and wind cuts it in half. So let's see what you have. Hiruzen finished as Kenta took the paper. Nodding, Kenta looked to the paper and began channeling his chakra, and the effect was instantaneous. It cut in half and one part crumpled up and the other side turned soggy. Kenta blinked in shock seeing the paper and looked to Hiruzen, who blinked in awe while he almost dropped his pipe. Well, this is certainly a rarity. 3 chakra affinities at your age. Most Jonin have 2 affinities, and 2 have 3 is quite rare. Hiruzen said, not taking his eyes off the paper. You certainly are full of surprises, just like your 2-san. Kenta couldn't help but smile slightly as he looked back to the paper. So what does this mean, Gigi? He asked, soon to be regretting that question as Hiruzen cleared his throat. 3 hours later, Kenta was now sitting down on the left sofa, his head in his hands as he desperately tried to keep himself awake, listening through the 3-hour-long lecture he had walked into, asking about what his new chakra affinities meant. He could remember all the Hiruzen had talked about, how each affinity made it easier for him to master jutsu of the same element, and how if clans with the Kekkei Genkei could combine the elements to form new ones, which had begun a whole history lesson on the different clans that had those Kekkei Genkei. Through it all, Kenta had made some mental notes for the next time he went to the library to look up Suiten, Futon, and Raiden jutsus. Although there wasn't really many of those last 2 in the library if he recalled. Now he was listening to Hiruzen talk about bunchins and how they can be made of different elements, when a certain phrase caught his attention. And then there's the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Kage Bunshin, though there were only 5 elements, where's this one fit into that? Kenta interrupted. Actually, Kage Bunshins are created by dividing one's chakra in half and splitting it evenly, so no actual elements are involved in this process. This one has an advantage over the others: the clones are more durable and have added effects, but its high chakra requirements and effects make it what is known as a kinjutsu, or forbidden technique, that only with my permission can it be taught. On top of which it is a B-class technique that is out of your league for now. Hiruzen warns. Kenta blinked at Hiruzen's words before grinning. What's that, Gigi? You think I can't hack it or something? I bet you I could have that jutsu down on my own in a week if I wanted to. Hiruzen chuckled. Ha ha ha, anxious as always for a challenge, he said before shaking his head, but this isn't something to be taken lightly, Kenta. The Kage Bunshin is a dangerous technique. If you use it too much, you could drain all your chakra and pass out from chakra exhaustion. Kenta smirked. Gigi, when I first unlocked my chakra and at the beginning of my training, Enko said I had one of the largest supplies she'd ever seen. She said I had high Jonin reserves, and that's only grown as I've trained. I think I've got enough chakra to spare easy. Hiruzen nodded his head. Indeed, I read her report on the matter. That's in Uzumaki's reserves for you. By the time he leaves the academy, his reserves will dwarf what mine were in my prime. Perhaps he could actually pull it off. It would only help his training if he does, and he could pass it on to Naruto in a few years when his own reserves become a problem. Very well, Kenta, I will give you permission to learn it. But first, I believe you said something about a bet. Kenta smirked as he looked to Hiruzen. Yes. All right, if I can do it in 1 week, then you take me on as your student. He said, his smirk growing. I learn under you when I'm not studying at the academy or on my own. To be your student like the Sannin would be an honor, as well as offer me a chance to learn rare jutsu later. Hiruzen blinked at the sudden request and slowly a smile came to him before he burst out laughing. Ha ha ha, I see, that's what you want, is it? Hiruzen laughed. Well, if you could master the Kage Bunshin at so young an age, you'd definitely be noteworthy enough for that honor, and it has been a while since I took on a student. 40 years actually. He said as he stood up from behind his desk and walked over to the right side bookcase and pressed the lower panel and channeled his chakra into it as it opened, revealing an assortment of scrolls, taking one of them as it closed. Hiruzen turned scroll in hand and smirked. Now what to choose is a penalty if you can't, he said as he paused to think before an even bigger smirk came to him. I know now, he said holding the scroll out, if you cannot master the Kage Bunshin within a week from now. Until both you and your brother graduate the academy, you will assist him in cleaning up all of his pranks even if you aren't involved and you aren't to tell him to stop. Kenta blinked and grinned. The answer was obvious. You're on. He said, taking the scroll and opened it and started reading. Hiruzen smirked as he walked back to his desk. You have 1 week. I'll expect the scroll returned then and you'll start cleaning up your brother's pranks that day as well. Kenta nodded as he read. Don't be so sure, Gigi. I'll have this done in no time. He said before rolling up the scroll. You'd better be ready to start my lessons when I get back, sensei. Oh, and before I forget, can we adjust my training schedule so I can have this day every week off? Hiruzen looked at him curiously for a second. Why's this, my boy? Has something come up? Kenta shook his head. It's just that I have a continuous arrangement that I've got from now on, so I need the day off each week to take care of it. Hiruzen chuckled. Very well, my boy, I'll arrange it with Anko. Now go on, get out of here, and good luck, he said, waving Kenta to leave. Kenta nodded as he walked to the door. You know, Gigi, I can already see how this jutsu will be useful. But I have to ask, with that whole memory and consciousness part, why don't you use them to do your paperwork? It could give you time to do more important matters like training. Kenta said, seeing the blinking form of Hiruzen looking at him. Kenta shrugged. Just a suggestion, he said before closing the door behind him. Hiruzen smacked his forehead. Damn it, why didn't I think of that? He said in a sigh just as an Anbu appeared in a shunshin. It had a white boar mask with a red streak down its right side. Hokage-sama, your presence is requested in the council chambers. A meeting has been requested, the Anbu informed him with a slightly monotone voice. Hiruzen sighed. Who called for the meeting this time? He asked, rubbing his temple. Both the elder council and the civilian side. The reason for the meeting was not given. The Anbu replied, voice still monotone. Hiruzen nodded. Very well then, let's get this over with, but first, he said as he formed the cross sign and 2 shadow clones formed, you two get started on tomorrow's paperwork and keep working the whole night. After this meeting I'm heading to bed. I haven't had an early night in 5 years. Hiruzen smirked before he disappeared in a shunshin heading for the council chamber. Scene break. Arriving in the council chamber, Hiruzen sighed slight, seeing everyone was already there. The room is a perfect circle with the curved tables in the shape of a horseshoe with a lower area in the middle for anyone called to speak before the council. On one side there was the civilian councilors, the more prestigious of the civilians, representing the shops, businesses, banks, farms, families, restaurants, services and public facilities of the village. Towards the end of the desk nearer to the Hokage's seat sat the elder council, made up of 3 members to serve as the Hokage's immediate council in times of war. It consisted of Homura Mitokado, a former teammate of Hiruzen's and member of the now dissolved Team Tobarama, his short hair now gray and receding, showing his aging lines on his forehead more and more each day. His lower jaw now covered by a short gray beard and his frown ever constant, his eyes always half closes past his jade green glasses. Kaharu Udatane, another former teammate of Hiruzen's and the last member of the now dissolved Team Tobarama, her gray hair pulled back in two buns with golden needle going through them like a dango stick. On the thinner end hangs two wind chime-like objects, and on the thicker end was three ruby-colored spheres. Her age clearly showing on her face as she has taken to squinting over the years. Both of which wore similar long kimonos in similar gray, brown and black color schemes, each held closed by a gray obi and a pale white sash. The third member of the Elder Council was Danzo Shimura, an old friend to Hiruzen. Though the two have very different views concerning the village's future, he also serves as the Hokage's military advisor in wartime. Though he had the appearance of a frail old man, any experienced shinobi could tell differently by sensing his chakra. He normally walked with a cane and half his face was covered in bandages extending over his right eye. He also has an X-shaped scar on his chin ever since he was young. His attire consisting of a white shirt and black robe covering from his right shoulder to his left hip and down to his feet, with a purple sash tied around his waist.